Have you ever had a money or career question you really wanted to ask, but didn't know who to go to or just felt uncomfortable even bringing it up? You're not alone. Talking about money can feel intimidating, even scary. And that's exactly what I'm trying to change. That's why I created a free virtual coffee chat, a casual, no pressure 20-minute conversation where you can bring one thing you're wrestling with and we'll talk it through. No judgment, no jargon, no sales pitch, just clarity, ease, and a real answer from someone who gets it. If you've got something on your mind, don't sit in the confusion. Book a spot at limitfreelife.com and let's sip and sort it out. Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game-changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, and welcome to another great episode of the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and I am really excited about today's show. It was somehow, I think with this season too, it feels really fitting. And I have a fantastic guest. She's actually won so many awards. I won't even read them all to you, but there's a few here. Forbes America's Top Next Gen Wealth Advisors of 2025. And many more. It goes back way before 25 too. So I'm super thrilled to have her. We had a great conversation before we set this up, and I think that you're just going to love the show. So we're going to talk about something. The reason I think it's kind of seasonally appropriate is that we're talking about legacy. And I don't know, I think December is a good month for reflection and really looking back at your life and also looking forward. And so I think this is a great topic. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce you to Morgan Nichols. So what kind of legacy are you leaving? And are you being intentional about it? Today's guest is Morgan Nichols, CEO of Life Branch Wealth Partners and co-author of Intentional Legacy. With years of experience advising clients across 4 generations, Morgan offers a fresh perspective that blends advanced financial strategies with the human side of wealth. Whether you're a high-income professional, part of the sandwich generation, a fellow advisor seeking a more sustainable way to serve clients, Morgan shares actionable insights on aligning wealth with life's most important values, which I love. I think wealth and your values should go together. And Morgan, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you on. And I'd love to just start with a little background on, how this became a bigger interest, an interest enough to write a book on it called Intentional Legacy.
Yeah, I don't think I ever necessarily thought I was going to be an author. I am a math and numbers girl all day long, but I realized, all the numbers and the spreadsheets in the world don't always make my clients have the level of comfort that really brings them peace of mind. And as working with clients over many years and then joining with Kelly joined my team in 2024, and we said, we're really passionate about making a difference. Intentionality is huge for us. How do we help just the general public, but also those who want to know more about their finances realize that it's not just, putting your money in an investment account and watching the return. Like there's so much more that goes into getting peace of mind. So kind of where we're at today is we really work with families. We help them align their money with their values. And again, this idea of intentional legacy, not just a bigger balance sheet, which, you said something at the beginning, you said, okay, okay, we're sitting here in December, we're thinking about legacy is a big thing this time of year. And I just think about all the families that are getting together over the holiday seasons, whether they're celebrating Christmas, Hanukkah, or another celebration, and often people are with those they care about most. It's the time that they're celebrating, they're wanting to share important lessons, and for many people it's also a time, we're talking about money, right? It tends to be one of the most expensive months of the year with gift giving and prioritizing. So many exciting things there.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. And I agree with you. And it can be a stressful month of the year too, with the extra expenses. I mean, it's not without its concerns when it comes to that, wanting to, keep those holiday parties going and get all the gifts for everybody. And, it's, there's this sort of underlying expectation that you keep things up, and if you happen to be finding yourself in a place where maybe you can't do that as well, it can be pretty stressful, actually. So, I love the idea of intentionality partly because I'm a coach and I literally am obsessed with intention setting. I set intentions before I do my podcast. I set them before I go into a meeting. I set them all the time, all day. But I find it's interesting that you brought that up, and it made me think when it comes to money, while we think we're being intentional because we have a plan, I don't think it goes that deep sometimes. It isn't intentional the way you're talking about it, like kind of, aligning with your values and making your life mean something around this money and having ideas for, what you want to do with it that is truly intentional. I think it's a little bit surface level for a lot of people where I just want to amass a lot of wealth. But there's no connection there with, what you really want, actually. You want the money, but for what reason? So, yeah. I mean, what kind of conversations are you having with people around this?
Well, I think you mentioned something, and again, there's a lot of information at our fingertips in today's day and age. You have a question on anything and you can either go Google it or you can, use AI to give you an answer. And there's just this overload of information, but not all of it necessarily pertains to you. Or even if you have all the information, it's sometimes, it's what do you do with it? So I often will think about what we do. You talk about being a coach. One of the coaches I like to think about is that concept of a personal trainer. Mm-hmm. I for years, I used to go on, whether it was Pinterest or other sources, and I'd get all these workouts and I'd be like, okay, I've got my game plan. Yeah. And then they would just sit on my phone and I would, hit the snooze alarm and not show up. So I know for me, I might be good with money, but I know for me to keep my health up, I have to do my training. And so I show up to a class, multiple times a week. And it's the accountability that, keeps me going and keeps me on track. And, we're talking about December where things are expensive. It's not this thing that you have to be perfect, right? We know for anything to be successful, there has to be some give and take. But when you're working with a coach or a personal trainer or a financial advisor, it's not just about having all the knowledge that's there. It's how do you figure out a sense of consistency? And how do you start, first of all, just assess, like, where are you today? Like, what habits are serving you? What are the things, the blind spots that get in your way? What are the things that are most important to you as you look forward? What are those goals that you have? For some people, I see it's getting free from debt. And for others, it's, hey, I'd like to retire, or, I want to retire maybe by the time I'm 60 or 65, but could I do it at 55? Or could I spend more and travel more and have just that peace of mind? And so I find it's not cookie cutter, right? We're not here just to give generic advice, but to understand top priorities, for those that we work with. And we do a values exercise. We work with individuals. And I think there's so many different things you could put out there as a value, as something that's a priority to you. But I'll often encourage people to really focus focus on their top 5. And sometimes it's easy to maybe narrow it down to your top 10 values, but when really getting to the top 5 and figuring out how do we use those as a filter as we're making decisions. And if your coach, understands your coach, your advisor, your trainer, they understand what's most important to you, they're going to filter it through your values, and help costly mistakes, things of that nature, and just track progress over time. And what I find is life changes. The plan you put in place, the information that you get at one point in time, it's not static. It really evolves. So it's really that concept of, when you're the clients that I work with, they don't hire me as a trainer or as a coach because they're failing. It's more because they're really serious about the progress they want to make, and they want to have some good accountability that can help guide them through everything that gets thrown at them, day in and day out, and have a little bit more financial peace of mind.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. And you brought up something that keeps coming up for me, which is the idea of consistency and good habits and discipline, frankly. I really want to touch on that and get your insight as to what some good habits would be. I think, a lot of us have the intention to do certain things, and then life gets busy and we have kids and we have all kinds of things. And so this idea that I'll, check in with my money on a regular basis, I always encourage people to have these money dates, but it's, and they love the idea. And when they do them, they feel really good about it. But when life gets in the way, they tend to push that off the calendar and do something else. And so then they get behind. And then, so I've really found that there needs to be, like with working out, like with the personal trainer, you have to have this, the discipline to keep it on the calendar and to stick with it, whether it feels good or not that day. Sometimes it's not that fun to look at your money. So what kind of habits do you think with money really help the most?
Yeah, a couple things that come to mind. First of all, anytime you can automate. Mm-hmm. So I like to sit there and say, instead of saying, I'm going to call in and add a little bit to my account, every quarter, or, when I get the next, my next paycheck, but saying is there, even if it's not the full amount that you want to be saving, if we're in a saving focus, it's how can we figure out at least a base level that we're able to just have it on auto draft, just get that ongoing system in place that is repeatable, and that you really get used to, being part of your life, or when you don't see it, when you're not having to make that decision, yes or no, every time, it's just working in the background. It really adds up over time. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things I see. I also think we're at a time of year where a lot of people are sitting out there and saying, I know a lot of companies, they may pay bonuses, or, you do your financial statement and you see how much do you have left over after that tax bill. Yeah. And sitting there either ahead of the bonus or before you do anything with any cash that may be available. A lot of companies will pay out in first quarter, and really thinking through, what are you doing with those dollars, right? How much of it is going towards your goals, and meeting and having a conversation with someone that can help you understand what's most important in this season. I have a client that right now, is getting ready to retire. Big bonus just paid out recently. They're still waiting to figure out how much is going to go to the tax bill. But, they're sitting there and having the conversation, do I use the proceeds to pay down or close to pay off my mortgage? And, what's the balance of doing that versus keeping the money in investable accounts? And that's where there's a lot of articles and a lot of information out there. And I think we have to take it, again, a little bit client by client. There's general rule of thumbs I have, sitting there and saying, if we put it all in your mortgage at a super low interest rate, we don't really have access to those dollars to pay day-to-day bills or to have some tax efficient access to capital in the early years of retirement. But I think it comes back a lot to our money habits, really can come back to understanding like what was money like for you growing up. Because when we have periods of uncertainty, I think what we see early in life kind of builds a foundation. And sometimes it ends up being our knee-jerk reaction of what to go to. I have other clients, they're young, they're in their 40s, and they're sitting on several $100,000s in the bank. But when I really dig deeper and I understand, well, what was money like for them? You know, one of their parents just kept taking on debt and was not financially responsible. The other set of parents, you know, they were as responsible as they could have been, but there was just never enough money there. So what I often find is, you know, in this whole search, it's really digging to understand some of what are the root causes, what are some of the realities of people's individual situations that may be forming their decisions, and then coaching with them and understanding the pros and cons. That, you know, for many people, I might say, you know, it doesn't make sense to have several $100s in the bank. But if it's really aligns with an emotional component and we can find a way to really understand and quantify what really makes good sense, we'll look at it person by person to give them a little bit more of that clarity and help them kind of figure out, kind of sift through just the noise and figure out how do we tailor that recommendation to meet not just, you know, the news that I see and what I say is best and prescribe to all my clients, but it has to resonate with them. And if we can meet both of those, we find it so much more impactful.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And it's bringing me back to our initial conversation and why I felt like I was so excited to have you on the show, because we definitely understand those, you know, that money relationship that really stems from the beginnings, you know, and how your parents were, how your, you know, I mean, maybe your parents, maybe your grandparents, might be a lot of things that have influenced how you feel about money. And you don't really tune into that unless either somebody like you talks to them about that. You just think it's the way you should do it. You know, you're not really consciously saying, well, this is the way I thought you should do it, but is that really valid? Or is it just a thought pattern based on these earlier, you know, life experiences? And so I love that you bring that up. And when you brought up the person with the hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, I immediately went to, I have a money archetypes assessment, and that would be the accumulator archetype, who is very fiscally responsible, loves to save, but can miss opportunities because their comfort zone is keeping money around and saving as well as possible and budgeting and not getting into debt. So in some ways it's a big positive, but you know, you can miss your chance to really grow wealth as well.
And I see that, you know, one of the things I've seen frequently in my client base is it's to be successful and to retire comfortably does not mean that you have to have the highest salary. It's just many of my clients have had good discipline along the way. And many of them were good savers for a long period of time, or they had a company that had a really good pension plan. And just the combination of it all coming together, what I find is, you know, we end up often in those early years or those middle years of retirement. And for some individuals, it's not everybody, but sometimes there's more money there than they're ever going to spend during their own lifetime. You know, and then there's this idea of, well, I want it to help the next generation, or, you know, I want it to help my children, or I don't care. It does, you know, there's so many variety of responses, but where I see a lot of value is digging deep and understanding, like, what are the top priorities, and, you know, are there tax advantages to doing things today versus waiting till the end of life? Is there, you know, how do we tune into the top values and make those dollars meaningful? Because there's sometimes a lot of unintended consequences that unless we're digging in, unless we're using our experts as the trainers or the advisors to dig in on that strategic planning, sometimes things can be missed. And, you know, not everyone digs into the level that we do, but that has provided a lot of fulfillment for me in my career, because I'll have, you know, some individuals where one of the big things that comes up as a value sometimes is family. But for, if you have a husband and wife, and I'll stick with a little bit more typical stereotypes, sometimes for, a woman, it might mean, family means I want to be physically present with my children, with my grandchildren. And, we're going to spend more money on trips and travel and, flying out to go see them in the other state because, my children are spread across the US. And for, sometimes for more of a male figure, and it can be obviously be reversed or different, but it's more, it's not so much about the time. It's I don't want them to have the financial strain, the financial needs. So just getting that communication. And I think when there are sometimes more than one decision maker, it's getting the clarity on where is each person coming from, and then understanding how the dollars may both support family, but maybe in more than one way. And being able to dig in there and help provide solutions and some other ideas has made a big difference.
Yeah. Thank you. I love this. And I love all the ideas coming up. Like, I love the automating habit, which is huge. And what I found is that, I think everybody would agree, as it's almost like having a little assistant behind the scenes helping you. So it's wonderful. But sometimes it takes a little time to set that up. And so I've even had things that I was intending to automate, but then there was work to do to get it, done. And so I put it off. And I was thinking, these are the things that require the consistent effort around your money. Like, take the time, take the hour or whatever it's going to be to figure out how to automate a particular thing, or which, setting up the account that you want to send it to. Maybe it's different than what you already have. So these things are so important to just take the time to do. And I feel like it's important to give that value, and to make sure that you are actually putting the time in and having that discipline. But I love what you're. Yeah, go ahead.
With the new year, I think it's a great time to think, let's just talk about automation for a moment, is sitting there and saying, spend a moment and reflect, what was your money story in 2025, right? What worked really well? And just be honest with yourself. What do you think could have been different, or where did you feel incomplete with the money journey, or where you needed more clarity, more information? You think you may have missed something. And then sit there and say, well, for 2026, I think people sometimes are scared to take action because they think it's either where they are today or perfection. And life is always changing. Perfection, I personally will realize sometimes I hold a really high bar for myself in life, and almost a perfection level. And anytime I fall short, I feel like I'm failing. But it's how do we measure that progress? So it's sitting there and saying, what are a couple things that might get me a little bit closer in 2026 that will make me feel like I'm making progress, whether it's bumping up what you're saving, whether it's a Roth IRA, a 401k, whatever it may be, or is it, I think there might be some more tax strategies or some long-term planning, and I don't have the information yet, but I want to get it and I want to learn more. Whatever it may be is just setting a goal that will move you closer to where you want to be, and then finding the right guides to help you in that process.
Yes, thank you. And the guides, not only are they guides and can give you advice, but they're sort of like accountability partners, because if somebody tells you, okay, this is what I'm going to do, then you can, be holding them accountable to that. And sometimes that makes us move a little faster as well. I love this. And
there's nothing like having a workout, right? Like having a workout class and just being like, oh, am I going to show up? Versus if you've got your workout buddy and the two of you are trying to get there together, you're going to get out of bed because you don't want to disappoint the other person.
I know. Isn't it crazy how well that works too? I mean, it really, you do show up no matter what. It's very interesting. So, I just keep coming back to there's so much mindset in what you're talking about, which of course I love, but even the things that we say to ourselves, this money story you brought up is, I love this. There's an exercise that I do. It's old story, new story. So what was your old story last year and what's your new story going to be for this coming year? And it's really important to think about these things. There's some just contemplation time around money that, it isn't all numbers. I mean, I wish it was, because then it's kind of like, it's simpler actually. But there's so much of this internal work to do.
Emotions.
That's right.
Emotions,
That's right.
like it really does impact your dollars. So
yeah, it sure does. And so I think, making the time to think, what is my old story? And I don't think we think about that enough. And when we start thinking about it, this is one of those things where you put the question out there, and as you start thinking about it, you come up with more. Like initially, you might have an answer to that, but as you continue to think about it, you just dig deeper, and you get some totally different ideas in your head about what your story's been, or you start noticing things. That's the biggest thing. Is you don't realize that you're constantly saying, oh my gosh, I'm so broke, I can't afford this. Like, that's a terrible thing to say to yourself, but these things do become automatic, and we don't notice them until we say, okay, I'm going to pay attention to what I'm saying about money. I don't have money to invest. I'll have to wait until my salary is, X. And so all of these ideas and thoughts take us down a road that doesn't serve us a lot of the time.
mindset is so big. I mean, I was even, not necessarily tied to money, but I'm going, growing and taking on new challenges with the business. And it's like, well, what's the story you've always told yourself? And what's the story you should be telling yourself? Mm-hmm. And the mindset switches and small steps can be huge for sure.
Yeah. I recently did a challenge with my coaching group. And one of the questions, there was a lot about, what you're going to do next year and what your goals are and those kind of things. But the question that stumped me the most was, if you had no fear, there was no fear and there was no consideration about money, like money wasn't a problem and you had no fear, what would you do? And I feel like that should have been an easy question. And it was so hard because there were so many things that I thought I would do, under those circumstances. But I couldn't, there's so many that I couldn't decide. And I thought, what an interesting thing, because that ties into what you could also do with your money, if you're trying to leave a legacy. And it's just interesting how what you come up with when you sit on some of these questions for a little while. I finally did get to an answer, and it was not what I didn't have this in my head until a few days of thinking about this. So, yeah.
Was it an exciting answer?
It was an interesting answer. I was actually, I'll just tell you what it was. I was working on a Sunday with a friend of mine who is kind of in the same industry. And I was trying to make up for lost time because it had been so busy. And we both looked at each other and we said, wouldn't it be great if we could take December off? Like, there was so much going on, which is why I was having trouble getting to my work. And then we both just came to this. And then I thought, yeah, wouldn't it be great if you could actually take December off, maybe a month in the summer, maybe another month, so I ended up really just thinking that is what I would do. But there were about a million things I could choose from. So,
I've been in accountability groups. I have got a great group of other women advisors, and we all share best practices. We support one another. We challenge one another. And we had an advisor that said, I'd like to be able to take off a whole month during the summer, but it felt impossible. And she just did it this year, and she's planning to do it next year. Wow. I ended up deciding to work remote for a month during the summer, and it's some of the time I make some of the biggest leaps in my practice because I'm not meeting with clients during that time, but I'm working on the practice so much, and I'm getting the clarity and the space to let myself think. And some of those things can really move you forward, and you don't even realize it until you give it a try. So I highly encourage, have those dreams. And I think sometimes even when people come and meet with me, they may have some big dreams or some things they'd like. They're like, the math doesn't work. I'm not going to be able to retire at this age or be able to spend this much traveling the world or whatever it may be. And I think it's good to have those things that do scare you a little bit, that give you this idea of, this would be really meaningful. And then we start figuring out, how do we find alignment with it? It's, I'm not here to say, oh, yes, we can, wave our magic wand and make it all happen. But there's often a lot of things we can do that help kind of fuel those dreams. So I really hope you do have that chance to look at 2026 and see, could you take December off? Because you might find that you're all the more effective those other 11 months out of the year as a result of taking that space.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually, it's funny. I came up with the idea, but I wasn't really challenging myself to actually do it. But I think now that you've said that, I will. I could plan around it, because we're about to go into planning season. So thank you for that.
It's how do you systematize it? So go get that calendar out and block it off and
right.
Work from there.
Yeah. And I really do love what you're saying. It also makes me think, I wonder if your clients come in wanting a great financial plan, but maybe not even thinking big enough. Everybody's so worried about, can I make, just what I need. And so I do think we kind of tamp down some of our desires, and kind of try to come up with something that sounds appropriate. But do you ever call clients out on that?
All the time. I have clients come in, they don't even know what they need. They just know that they've got accounts. They don't feel secure, or they don't feel like they've got clarity. They don't know, can I retire, or, what are the levers? And they start working with us, and there's just this calm that comes over them as they start working with us as we get through that first year, because I think so much you have to get clarity.
Yeah.
And understand the levers, because it's not like this is the only way to do it. Let's understand, what are the variables and what do you want to prioritize, so that, you may sit there and say, okay, I want to retire, I want to retire at 62. Well, it's going to take X much more of savings. Are you willing to spend less or are you willing to do part-time work in retirement? Like, what are those items that are going to help you? And the more time you have to plan, usually the better it is, and the more flexibility. So yeah, definitely. And then just the peace of mind I hear from my clients after they work with us, they don't realize how much coaching goes into it. Sometimes I feel like we're therapists navigating, because we're talking about emotions or we're talking about money, and money ties with emotions. And we hear a lot about the history and the things that have guided our clients in their decisions. Yeah.
And I love that you're hearing that, because I think the best financial advisors out there are digging into that. Without that, it's just a formulaic thing that doesn't really even relate to the person.
Well, and I think that's where I challenge clients a lot about legacy as well. Because, this, as we were talking, I wrote a book, Intentional Legacy. And so, here you have a 35-year-old talking to everyone about legacy. And it's like, what does legacy really mean? Because for so many people, they come in, they're like, well, do you have your will in place? Do your children know where the will is? Do we have the powers of attorney in place? And those are foundational documents, but I don't really think about that as necessarily being the legacy. I mean, there's going to be some financial dollars there that will need to be determined how they're treated. But how do we start drawing that conversation and engaging our clients with what legacy means today? What does it mean now? And I think legacy is really built through those values-based decisions. And I think sitting right here, whether it's right now as we're talking at the end of the year in the holiday season or getting into the new year, it's how do we start engaging with those we care about and starting to establish what our legacy is. I was thinking about this a little bit most recently because I'm a mom and I have a 3-year-old daughter. And so we're sitting here around the holidays, and one of the organizations I'm involved with, I'm on a nonprofit board for a local, or I'm on a board for a local nonprofit that really helps the underserved in our community. And so it really touches my heart. You know, we had a chance to help families just last week go shopping for Christmas that may not have been able to provide Christmas to their families otherwise. And I see as an adult the impact and the emotions around that. And then I go home to my 3-year-old who's really never wanted for anything. You know,
Right.
she's 2 working parents. We've been able to provide, you know, she's finally learned what Santa is. And, you know, we're 3 years old and I ask her what she wants for Christmas and she tells me presents. You know, we're very into everything Frozen or Mermaid right now. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, giving back is a really important to me. And that's something I want to be part of my legacy. But it's not just what am I doing on my own day to day. I'm sitting there thinking, as we start going through future opportunities and into next holiday seasons, how do I help my daughter understand, you know, we're very fortunate that we're able to have a good Christmas or have a good Thanksgiving meal, and understand maybe not everybody's able to do that the way we are, and figure out what are the age appropriate ways that I can get her involved with us giving back. Mm-hmm. So she starts learning that this is part of who our family is. This is what we care about. This is what we believe in. And that's just one small example, I think, of, you know, if that's part of the legacy I want to lead, how can I bring her in? You know, we're not even talking about big money or anything at this point. Right. It's just the lessons. And so I think that's a really good conversation for anybody to think about, is what are those things that you care about the most, and some of those habits that you can bring your loved ones in, that they can get that influence and understand, again, the legacy you leave. It's not going to be just the dollars or the investment accounts that you leave at the end of your life. It's really these decisions you make every day and that you choose to repeat.
Oh, I love that. And that's all laid out in your book, which I really love. I think this is so important. I mean, when we think about planning, we think about looking forward, but in a way, it's more about reverse engineering, like from whatever results we want, ultimately, both, like you say, in terms of money, but also in terms of ideas and all kinds of, you know, kind of ways to look at life and things like that. I think.
And reflecting and just giving grace for the reality of the situations that have gotten you to where you are today, and that your life scenarios have played a role in how you view money.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And this is beautiful. And, you know, you talk about legacy from the standpoint of people in their 30s and, you know, younger people looking at that. And I know I made some big mistakes in this, because when I was that age, you know, all this stuff seemed really far away. And so I did the classic, like, we'll think about that later. And I missed a lot of opportunities. I mean, I wish I'd been that 25-year-old putting money into my accounts, you know, and forgetting about them for all this time. But it, you know, they say that Gen Z is very, and I know that because I have a 25-year-old daughter, but they are so money conscious. And they're doing things that maybe Gen X didn't necessarily do. And I say money conscious. I think they're money anxious, actually. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that part's so great, but they are investing and they are paying attention and they're thinking about money a lot. And so I don't know, are you seeing that at all? And what would you advise them to, and, you know, in terms of thinking about this legacy?
You know, I think it's a great opportunity, if you haven't already, just to sit down with her. I mean, whether it's over, you know, frozen yogurt or coffee or getting your nails done, okay, maybe not, you know, fully in public, but just understanding, like, what are those anxieties she has, or what are the things that she's prioritizing or sees as most important. And be authentic in sharing, like, hey, here's what I think I've done well, and here's where I wish I would have done something differently. And I think just that transparency in trying to provide education to that next generation is huge. I often, you know, it's very interesting because different generations treat money differently. I deal with, you know, a generation where, you know, thinks that thinks that a lot of young people spend money frivolously today, whether it's, ordering food on DoorDash or eating all their meals out. And, that's just not how it was when we grew up or when we were starting in our careers. And the reality is it's always going to be a little bit different, but how can we understand where somebody's at and start building a foundation? I think for young individuals, the best thing is making sure that they understand their employer benefits. Are they leaving free money on the table? What are the options available to them? When they get their open enrollment, their benefits package, I know at that age, I didn't know what disability insurance was, but if someone asked me, do I want to be living back at home on mom and dad's couch if I can't work, the answer would have been no. So, it's just helping them get that clarity and start to have confidence in getting the ball moving. And I think just incremental adjustments year over year. Again, a lot of times, first quarter of the year is the time that people are having their year-end reviews. And you're sitting there and saying, if you sit there and you said, okay, I got a 5% pay increase this year. Yes, there's inflation. That's going to be something that we're always navigating. But is it possible to take, maybe 3% of that to adjust for some inflation factors and 2% of it to bump up the savings? And just doing those little things time over time. If you start doing it at 25, when you're 35 or 45, you're going to look back very grateful that you took the steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the fact that you bring up employee benefits. I don't think I did that. I mean, I was happy to have my health insurance and maybe a 401k match or something. But beyond that, I didn't think about any of these other things. And so, and I love what you were saying about just talking about what I would have done, because, people don't like to be given advice when they're your child. You'll find that out later. But so just talking about your own experiences is a good way to just communicate, like, this wasn't a great idea and this was something that I did well.
So my husband had a very frank conversation with me. I was probably all of 23 or 24. And at that point in time, I was saving, let's just say 3-4% in my 401k because that was my employer match. And I thought I was good. I'm good for retirement, not really thinking about retirement. And I cried when he talked to me. He said, Morgan, you need to be saving at least 10% of your income for retirement. And what I learned over time was really you should be saving closer to 15% before you have kids. And then if you have kids, the bring it down to 10% and it kind of washes out. And I remember sitting there and I was almost in tears. I was like, how am I going to save 10% of my income for the future? Like, how does that work? But it's kind of that automating. It's like, okay, maybe I went from 4% to 6% 1 month, and then 2 months later to 8%, and eventually I got to 10%. But I'll tell you, that conversation has always stuck with me because it felt painful in the moment. It required me to make some significant adjustments, or I wasn't able to spend as much eating out, and I needed to plan a little bit differently. Yeah. But fast forward, it has been at least a decade since that, and it has made all the difference. So not everyone's telling that next generation what they really should be doing, and they need people that they can reach out to that will help them with some perspectives to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the earlier you start this, and frankly, the earlier you find people like you to help think about the various decisions is super, super important. The older people are in a completely different category and probably feeling quite desperate, actually, the ones who've neglected it for a long time. So it's a different conversation, but it's fun. It's a fun conversation at 30 because you have time to make all kinds of mistakes and for things to change. And
for a lot of 30-year-olds, it's hard if you're about, there's always something you're going to be juggling. Mm-hmm. Right. It may be having a young family or, having made a job change and the pay cut's a little bit less. If we're always waiting for it to get easier. Yeah. And again, waiting for that perfect moment, time will pass us by. So it's just incremental adjustments and getting systems in place. Yeah,
absolutely. And if you relate it back to your, personal trainer, I mean, a lot of times, you were talking about just bumping up the amount that you're saving. When we do that, when we weight train, we don't start out with the weight that we ultimately want to be lifting. And so it's really similar. I don't know why we put so much pressure on with money. Like like you said, if we can't do it perfectly, then, we're upset. And it really, there's the phrase progress, not perfection. And I think that is, if we just apply that to everything, we'll be better off. But well, let's close on a little summary from your book. I would love to hear something that really that you just find to be one of the really important messages that you're writing about.
I think for me, again, on the spirit of intentionality, I like to stick with this idea that you've got one life to live. So you might as well make it as meaningful as possible and start really thinking about this stuff and having the conversations. And I know we've been talking about a lot of this already, but time will pass you by if you don't. So how do we, it might start with money, but it really reaches out to encompass all the areas of your life. And if we're living with intention, if we're understanding what do you want from your life, there's lots of different values. For some people, it's security. That may mean physical, that may mean financial. Some people really want freedom or flexibility, or generosity is important, faith, whatever it is. It's just, let's dig in and really understand what our top priorities are, and then figure out how to make those come to life for you. Because the more alignment you have, the more you're going to feel like your life has purpose and meaning, and that's a really freeing thing.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. And how can people get a hold of your book? Is it out there in the world? Is it on your website? How do people find it?
Yeah, you can always reach out to us. You can always reach out to us by email, but we do have a website specifically for the book where you can request a copy. So it's intentionallegacybook.com. So intentionallegacybook.com. And then you're always welcome to reach out to us on our website too, which is lifebranchwealth.com.
Okay, wonderful. And you serve how, like, the country? I mean, can people work with you from anywhere?
Yeah, it's actually been really neat because we actually now have team members spanning from coast to coast. We serve clients in about 45 different states. So we have been very used to working with people virtually, whether it's through, an online meeting, a phone call, or also in person.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and you have won quite a number of awards, so it's pretty impressive. And yeah, I kind of love that, actually. And so I think people can find you on your website and maybe LinkedIn. Are you there as well?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, Morgan E. Nichols. So
okay,
you mentioned something earlier. You said if you had, if money weren't an issue and if fear weren't an issue, like, what would you do? And I was kind of thinking about that. And I think spending this last year really focusing on intentionality. I love building. So achievement is one of my top values. I love building the firm that we're building and bringing financial confidence, that peace of mind to people, and being able to really build a team that can do that and really bring meaning to our industry. Mm-hmm. Because, financial advisors, we're not all exactly the same. And there's quite, so it's how do we coach and bring that reality to life? So I feel like in some ways I've taken the bullet and I've said, okay, let me face that fear and see how we can build it. And it's been really fun in the process. So that's where my passion lies.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's not easy. I mean, it's wonderful that you're having fun, because a lot of people try to build businesses and run into a lot of roadblocks. So that's really great. And, I hope people will take away kind of the energy and what you're saying, because my take, having done a lot of podcasts with different financial advisors and planners, is that you guys care about the person. You care about them living their life dreams and taking care of their family and being secure and all the things that they want. And it's much more, it's actually been enlightening for me. Financial planners, I think a lot of people thought it was about the money for them. But what I'm finding are very real people who really feel, like they're being really of service and helping people to really live the life of their dreams, which is kind of what coaches and other people do as well. So I really love it. And yeah, so
I realized I enjoyed this way more than my peers in college. I had to kind of revisit, like, what did I want to do with my life? And I was like, okay, I like giving back. Servant leadership is important, but I also like working with money. It was like figuring out if we can make a difference in people's lives, if we can help them be more free. That's a way that we can do it. So
yeah, it's fantastic. It's really changed my viewpoint too of the whole industry, actually, from having these great conversations.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So Morgan, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I hope the audience took a lot of this in and it got them thinking. And for you listeners, please reach out to Morgan. Please buy her book, Intentional Legacy. I think there's a lot to learn from that. And great for the new year to really get your planning underway and maybe think a little bit bigger and really get the clarity that you've been talking about. That is the key to everything, whether it's business growth or financial growth or your health and wellness. So, well, thank you. And audience, thank you so much for listening. We love it when you listen to the Limit Free Life show, and you can find us on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. Actually, it's the Money and You show. I'm sorry, Limit Free Life show is old. And you can find us on all the podcast platforms. Please share the show with anyone that you think would benefit from it, and give us a like and a review. And that all helps us bring on wonderful guests like Morgan. And thank you. See you next week.